to get folks kind of acquainted with this work and really start building a group together. So thank you so much for hearing about this invite and thinking this is a place that I want to be. If the answer to that was yes, we also want you here. And so my name is Catherine Karkoff. I'm with Home and Heart in Butte County, and I'm the chair for this housing committee. And a lot of today is just going to be folks introducing themselves. And then we have Carolyn joining us in a little bit. And she's going to be kind of giving some overview of the local master plan on aging. And we also have Sharon here, who's been doing really extensive work on listening sessions and has a lot of information specifically for housing that I think can really kick off this group. And then the other things I wanted to just kind of go over is who else do we think should kind of be in this group and in this space, and then kind of talk about opportunities. So tall, ambitious order for 1 hour, but we'll kind of see where we get. So I'll start off and then we can kind of go around. And if for whatever reason you have to put your intro in the chat, feel free to do that. So as I mentioned, my name is Catherine Karkoff. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm with Home and Heart. And the way that we sort of work with older adults and housing, we kind of work at the intersection of those two things. So we do home sharing with older adults who are looking to age in place. We match home providers with home seekers. A lot of times those home seekers are also older adults themselves because, as folks in this room might know, older adults are the fastest growing rate of unhoused. And so we kind of sit at this intersection of issues with older adults, issues with disability, and housing. And we have learned a lot in the last 3 years, a lot about what the needs of our community are, and just a lot about the housing crisis and how it affects folks. So I'm super grateful for this space. When we go around, if you just want to say your name and your agency and how you work with older adults in what capacity, and if you want to shout out like why you're interested in this space too, that's great. So I'm just going to kick it off to folks around me. So Megan, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Massey. I'm the Executive Director for New Beginnings Housing Foundation. We work with Far Northern Regional Center to seek affordable housing solutions for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we are also actively working to acquire properties so that we can offer affordable housing to that population. I'm really excited to be here because I've worked both with the IDD population and in housing for a really long time, and I'm pretty passionate about the intersection of solving housing solutions and our seniors, specifically seniors who have very fixed incomes, which I work with that population quite a bit. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Megan. All right. Next up, I'm going to go to Sharon.
Hi, my name is Sharon Brizzolera, and I am Director of Inquiry That Matters. And my intersections there are, I'm supporting the this regional local master plan for aging group, and in their first phase, not exclusive to housing, we looked at housing, healthcare, and transportation, doing the listening sessions and intersecting with SCAN. And some of my business work, which is primarily evaluation, but also some organizational capacity building around equity issues. I also work with the Shasta Equal Justice Coalition, the Shasta Resilience Project, and some other groups that are looking at equity concerns across the lifespan. So that's me.
Great, thank you. Let's go next with Chris.
My name is Chris Smith. I'm an analyst with Glenn County Health and Human Services. Just a month 2 of my position, so I'm been tasked with learning about housing and the aging population. So yeah, I'm here to learn.
Great, thank you, Chris. And I'm just gonna read from Keisha, who just put in the chat. Keisha is working for the Oroville Southside Community Improvement Association with various services for South Oroville residents, feeding programs for the elderly, and Haven of Hope on Wheels, which serves homeless folks. And Keisha also does operations and strategic consulting work for nonprofits. And awesome, Keisha, we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much. All right, next up I see Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Westbrook. I'm the Red Bluff City Manager. In my former life, I was the Community Development Director here in Red Bluff, and then also a City Manager in another jurisdiction. So I think for me, always providing opportunities for housing of all types is one of my interests. So I was invited to participate, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I'm muted. Thanks so much. We're happy to have you too, Tom. All right, next up, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. My name's Matt Bowen. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Services of Northern California. Legal Services of Northern California is a legal aid organization. We're a nonprofit law firm that's focused on helping folks identify and defeat the causes of poverty. So I'm really happy to be here because housing is a really important part of that puzzle, and I'm really excited to hear more and meet you all today.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. And Kate, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I'm also with Legal Services, so I won't say a whole lot more, but we're also the legal services provider for the agency, the Area 3 Agency on Aging. So we do a lot of work with folks. And then just a brief shout out is that we're also representing our Reading office that covers Shasta as well. So Matt and I are in our Butte office that covers Butte and Glen, but we're also in touch with the folks in Shasta.
Great. Awesome. And next up, I see Hillary.
Hey everyone, Hillary Crosby. I'm the Executive Director for Safe Space Winter Shelter as well as Outreach to Outcomes. Safe Space focuses on people experiencing homelessness, and obviously the end of the spectrum there of people who can't afford housing and where do they end up, and the aging population that's on the street is of huge concern. So I definitely want to see some progress in that and advocacy for those who are on fixed incomes and can't just go get a job and find a way to pay rent. So that's something that's very important to me. Outreach to Outcomes really focuses on equity work and as well as equity and disaster services and our marginalized and vulnerable populations and underserved populations, really. So post-incarceration, persons of color, all those things that factor into, barriers. So that's kind of my world, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. And David.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Madrigal. I'm the program manager with Tama County Community Action Agency. We administer the Meals on Wheels program, and we also have a housing program where we get referrals from Adult Protective Services. So it's a lot of seniors, older people. And what we've seen with that program is a big increase in the number of referrals we've gotten over the years of people who are on the verge of becoming homeless. A lot of those people are elderly, or that people that are homeless. So we have like an increasing aging population that's going into homelessness, and we're trying to prevent that with this program. So so kind of twofold in my hat as far as the senior part, and kind of been following the master plan on aging since it was put out a few years ago. And it's great to kind of get that momentum going again and see what we can do.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. And Carolyn is experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties joining. So she will be joining in hopefully just a couple of minutes. But Sharon, I'm wondering if we just kind of want to get started with your presentation as she figures that out. And then we can kind of give an overview of the local master plan on aging. So instead of zooming out and then in, we're going to zoom in and then out.
Sure. Let me get my hopefully sharing the right thing. I've developed this terrible habit of having so many things open. So I will mention something that Carolyn will likely mention, in that this local master plan for aging has had a couple of different stages. And the first stage, we, along with two other communities in the state, got some money from the SCAN Foundation to do a deeper dive into some of the needs for rural communities. You know, there was a recognition that the master plan for aging by the governor's office has some great information, some great goals, but also has a pretty clear urban bias, and that we wanted to make sure that the strategies suggested reflected both local realities, rural realities and context, and also were really informed by individuals whose needs and interests were not, we suspected, were not adequately and necessarily accurately represented in the statistics and information that we had. So part of our charge from the stage one, and now this is continuing in stage two, was to hold listening sessions. And these, let's see if I put this here. So here's a list of the listening sessions that we initially did. And our first two areas of focus were Shasta and Butte, and Glenn got added on towards the end there. So the idea was to do that dive initially and to move forward. I will say from the beginning, I'll probably repeat it as well, that we and the other groups funded by SCAN were not under the illusion that these focus groups would be sufficient data in itself, and certainly both the plan, what we were getting from other resources in terms of data already being collected, also informed the overall recommendation, but we wanted to hear directly from residents. The participants that are listed here were identified by the group as some of the populations we wanted to make sure to get more information from. We weren't able to, we had a lot of outreach and contact. We used a lot of personal connections between Carolyn and I and the advisory group. We had connections with a lot of different groups. We ended that 1 year process with a list of others that we wanted to make sure we connected with, and those are coming in year two. So residents who live in parks with homes not on foundations, as well as people who are currently unsheltered. We wanted more individuals who were veterans. We had a group self-identified as Latinx, but they were clearly very bilingual. So we're hoping we're in connection with groups in Tehama so that we can hold some of those in Spanish. And there were a few other groups. But we had really great participation from these groups, and the recommendations are largely based on their input. We did have, you'll notice, some groups of providers. So from PSA 3 and 2, a range of people who serve daily with a range of services, older adults. And so we felt that their input and observations as voices for what people have told them and the needs that they've seen were also important. So we recorded, transcribed the interviews, and the recommendations were made by the participants. We did talk about available housing resources, and we'll send this to you, so I won't go over all of them, but these are not, our list of resources really highlight what people saw and felt were resources and knew about. Certainly in all of the listening sessions, as many of you are aware, there were gaps in knowledge or misconceptions about who was eligible or perceived barriers to reaching out. You know, so for example, our group from NorCal Outreach, you know, really talked about, well, do we know that they're safe unless we have vetted a source as safe? Then that's not very comfortable. And we certainly heard from a group at a Bethel AME church, an African American church, some really chilling stories about their treatment by some of healthcare providers in particular, or housing concerns of people that they reached out to personally because of lack of attention of landlords and other things that raised safety concerns. So these were ones that they saw, and I think Legal Services of Northern California, they described you as legal aid on occasion, definitely saw you as a resource. There was a lot of, we asked them about strategies that they use in terms of connections, and there were a lot of really strong strategies that revealed, both from the positive way, the commitment, the ingenuity, the energy that people are putting into making sure that their needs are met, and the flip side of that, of the energy and work that it takes to either push systems to respond to their needs. And the report has some clear examples, again, of NorCal Outreach, where it was, a lot of really strong advocates in that regard, or forming coalitions for people to have those needs met, and advocating for support at various levels of nonprofits and housing complexes and whatnot. So some of the contextual factors that came up from group, again, the individuals and the providers, were things that are familiar to many of you in your work. The gaps both in services, but often in eligibility for services, and not just being over income, but in terms of medical transportation, what else you might be able to do if you have medical transportation, who can come with you, how those reimbursements happen. Certainly there was concern about a lack of services and outreach for people experiencing dementia or beginning to experience that. Clear need for caregiving support, and also later support for those caregivers in another section that allowed people to stay in their homes, depending on, let's see if that comes on the next one, but depending on where folks lived, if they were renting, if they had a home that was not on a secure foundation, that the ability to make repairs or accommodations so that they could access things was difficult. Discrimination, both in housing, the cost of applying for, several groups talked about the need to pay to put in an application for a rental home, never hearing back. Those costs, even if, $25 adds up pretty quickly. And the sense that that was a strategy that some were using to make money. Certainly services for those transitioning from incarceration. That was another group that we had through the day reporting center. And changes in communities after wildflowers. So we talked to people in Magalia, and the resources that were available to them, knowing neighbors who they could count on, those things. And certainly we experienced that in Shasta. I lost my home here as well, have a big impact for folks. So some of these challenges that people experienced, even when, if you could find someone that was affordable to make some of the repairs or accommodations for safety, not knowing who that individual was, and your safety concerns or those of your caregivers were barriers, as well as whom you might rely on for transportation and caregiving. I mentioned the applications, certainly home insurance for those who own or co-own their home has become an increasing issue, lack of fire insurance, or the requirements of needing to change. We heard in Magalia that someone had a trailer, but with the money that they were going to get would be required to put a foundation, and that whole process would raise their costs such that they couldn't afford it, given their income. and then all the other costs of propane or firewood or utilities and gas, especially those who lived outside of the area, say in Shingletown. You know, we had a person who lived there because they could afford it, but then all the other costs become prohibitively expensive. I'll send these to you. Some of those we addressed those. We found, and Carolyn was with me for most of these presentations, and found that there were many things that people expressed as recommendations that did exist. And we would follow up. Carolyn would often make another meeting with them to let them know about some resources that were available. So the recommendations that come, and I don't know if we want to go through all of these, there's a list, but it's the recommendations, many of the recommendations that you will consider. In the report, we put a full list of recommendations. Some of the recommendations we wanted to reflect, even though they might be things that were outside the purview of the group or required change in federal law, say. We wanted to make sure that those were reflected because of the response that it might trigger for other providers, that we might look at it as a group and say, well, that requires, a change in federal law, and someone else might see a remedy or have an opportunity to offer that recommendation. For example, for a while, I was an associate dean of equity and inclusion and then student services. And we had someone from the Department of Transportation come do listening sessions in Red Bluff with a range of people. And so there are opportunities like that it's good to have the voices of what people are experiencing to offer in those venues. So what we did next in terms of recommendations, and I'll just kind of continue with these, is we had a smaller subgroup. We presented it to the larger LMPA group, which is quite large, and Carolyn can speak to how many people are on there. The recommendations, what they thought, had gathered input in prioritization in terms of what was possible within the scope, our capacity and resources, and the time involved. So the idea was we had a certain amount of money. We have some more money now. And we wanted to have depth and where we could move the needle in the interest of these three areas. And also in terms of creating a more of a no wrong door policy, working with older adults. The services in any one area, we've seen this again and again in presentations, are so scattered. And our PSAs are wonderful resources in that, as well as a newly developing ADRC. And I'm going to let Carolyn talk about that as a resource hub for not being sent to 3 different places till you find out what's available and where to go. So those that our larger group informed which should be an area of focus. And then the subgroup, which included Carolyn, myself, and I'm going to forget everybody, Carolyn can jump in, but a board of supervisors from Chico, a range of different folks worked. I think we had 3 3-hour sessions and work in between to really prioritize and formulate which recommendations would be advocacy on the part of the LMPA, which ones might be investments, which ones required programmatic change. So for example, some of the eligibility requirements, or the idea that we'd advocate for funding, funding streams in rural for rural providers that recognize, although the population is small, there's multiple and much more complex issues at hand. So that's a longer term goal. So the final set of 25, 26 recommendations are the ones that are the focus of this next phase, and the ones related to housing are being given to this work group to help inform, to help make actionable, to bring in voices that need to be at this table, to set some guidelines, all of those things. So these work groups are really critical in helping take that next step. So Catherine, I don't know if you want to, if
Yeah,
we want to see if
no,
anybody
thank
has
you.
questions, or take it to Carolyn.
Yeah, well, let's just kind of pause there for a second. Thank you so much for there's a lot here, but it's also I mean, incredible work went into this. But it's also like, we know a lot of these issues, right? We see them a lot in our work. And so I think, you know, to really emphasize what Sharon said, that the point of this committee is really to be a group that kind of focuses on what we can do. And exactly what Sharon was talking about, where we worked out sort of these things, see more advocacy, smaller lift, bigger lift. I can send that out to the group as well. But I know, you know, as Sharon went through this, the first, second, and now third time I've heard it, it's like, yeah, yeah, we know a lot of these issues. We know what the needs are, and really hoping this group can kind of get to work and using the larger local master plan on age steering committee to kind of support that work. And I don't know if folks have been following, there's a lot of housing legislation coming down the pipeline, and so it's all pretty timely. Sharon, thank you so much for giving that background. I have one question that I'm going to open it up before I give it over to Carolyn. Are you still doing listening sessions? And if someone here works for an organization that maybe wanted to participate with you, could they do that?
Yes, definitely. And this round, we also are supporting 2 other organizations that are gathering data from their clients and stakeholders. One is doing a survey format, and I just got those surveys. The other, we're going to talk them through some guidelines for holding listening sessions. We are in the middle of scheduling ones with Spanish-speaking folks in Tehama. And I reached out but haven't heard about veterans also in Tehama. And we're kind of starting there in part because Tehama wasn't represented in our first round. And also some groups in Glenn County that CJ, you might have learned more from, some that Bill has connection with, both tribal leaders and community members, as well as members of other, you know, rancherias. So those are kind of in the works. And folks, you know, our intention also is in folks who are in assisted living to go in there as well and negotiate having a listening session. We do have some resources for those who participate. The first time, and I believe we're honoring it this time as well, as $25 cards. Last time what was identified was either, I think it was Target or Walmart, available to folks, as well as follow up on resources.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon. And does anybody else have any questions? Sharon has to leave a little bit early. So if you have any questions for her, let us know. And then Sharon, would you mind just putting your email in the chat in case folks want to reach out to you about those listening sessions?
Sure. And I'm going to find the link to the report and put that in as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Good to see you.
All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to introduce Carolyn. Carolyn Nava is the director of DAC and DAN, and has really spearheaded a lot of this work and has been an incredible mover and shaker. So that I figured she was the best person to kind of give us an overview of the background of the local master plan on aging. And Carolyn, we just had Sharon give us an overview of the housing. So as I said, instead of going out in, we went in out. And so you're gonna take us back
Thank
out.
you. I appreciate that, your patience. I could not get in. I literally had to leave the center, drive to my private office in order to get in. So as I'm communicating with you, I'm driving across town to get to connectivity. So it's just one of those
Oh,
days.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what happened there, but we are very glad.
No,
to
it's not you. I think it's on this end somehow, but we're connected now, and that's the important thing, right?
There it is.
Thank you again, Sharon. I was able to hear most of what you were sharing with the group, and I think it's a good opener to what I'm going to be following up with, Catherine. Do you want me to just dive right in? If so, I will start a screen share and work through this.
Yeah, go for it. I think you have capacity. Yep, there you go.
Yes, and rather than being a talking head, I want to be really relaxed here. And, you know, if thoughts or questions come up or interjections as I'm talking, please, please, please feel free to raise your hand or pipe in. I like to keep things very informal. We're all community. And in 2000, well, if we start from that whole concept of the master plan for aging, that's been something that's been floating around at state level for probably closer to 15, 20 years. There's been talk of this through various initiatives, all surrounding reforming our Medicaid system, our healthcare system, our housing challenges. We all know where housing sits in California. It's why so many of us are here today and we're passionate about it. My role is multiple hats at the Disability Action Center. I'm Community Relations Director and also the lead in what we call internally as a Center for Independent Living Systems Change. So I am a 9-county systems change advocate, and I do that in various capacities from a local as well as a county and state level presence. I sit on probably, I think, I have 4 state committee appointments coming from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So it's quite a bit to juggle, but I think it's no more juggling than what each of us normally does here. So if we think about systems change, everything about our housing crisis is engaged in this, but I wanted to back up and help you understand the role of a Center for Independent Living in our community. I'm just curious how many of us gathered here today really understand what a Center for Independent Living is or are quite familiar with what a Center for Independent Living is. If you are, please just raise your hand and I'll kind of get a pulse. I don't want to repeat what you already know. Awesome. So in the United States, there are technically, I think last count, 403 centers for independent living in the United States. 28 of those centers are in California. We are watchdogged by what is called the Administration for Community Living. That's our federal watchdog, the ACL, or the Administration for Community Living. And then part of that responsibility for oversight filters down to the state level. And that is done by the State Independent Living Council, or SILC. So as a Center for Independent Living, we sit between these 2 state and federal guideposts, and we do our best to bring a more human element and energy to our communities. We've talked a little bit with Sharon's presentation about how hard hit we've been in this region with firestorms, with the issues with our local Oroville Dam, with housing crisis, which has just worsened in the wake of all of these disasters. In our region, we have experienced the equivalent of 1 federally declared emergency every quarter for the last 5 years in our region. So it is a constant barrage. And what we find is that there's a different face to the homeless now. It used to be that many of the homeless were on the streets partly because they were displaced post-incarceration, many because they were facing behavioral challenges in the form of mental challenges, behavioral disorders. Our now highest homeless population in Butte County is a white female in their late 50s to late 60s. So think that decade, late 50s to late 60s, who have been displaced due to lack of financial capacity to keep their housing post-disaster. Many of those individuals have disabilities, sometimes multiple disabilities. So now they have come in large throngs into our centers. We have one in Chico, one in Redding, but they're looking for a way to remain independent in our community. And that includes adequate housing. We could go through statistics about the lack of housing, how it contributes to poor health, all of those things we're probably all quite familiar with. As a Center for Independent Living, we're governed by the individuals in our community that come in and they tell us what they want to see, what they want to hear, how they want that center to operate. You see the counties there that we are actively in, 9 counties, parts of 10. So we do cover this whole region. We are a private independent nonprofit and have stayed in this capacity servicing free of charge to our counties for now 44 years, coming close to moving into our 45th year of service. And so everything that we do encompasses what will it take for you to remain autonomous in the life that you choose in the community. And as such, we do what we call housing strategies. We cannot, by federal law, provide housing. A federal Center for Independent Living can only assist with temporary housing, which means something that will keep you sheltered for 90 days or less. Beyond that, we have to collaborate and go multi-sector to service the community with more permanent housing, which we're very actively engaged in. It's just not something that we can provide a direct service for. And that was our interest in connecting, for example, with Home and Heart, was how to better service our community, getting them connected to different types of housing, more permanent housing, beyond what we would be able to do. We also look at systems change from the perspective of, in order for change to really be effective, first of all, you have to have a big vision, a very big vision. And then you must bring together the individuals that can have the spirit and the physical energy to input those visions into reality. We are, with this master plan for aging initiative, which is including our meetings here today, looking at multi-generational approach to everything that we do, especially for housing. One of the boards that I actively sit on, I'm honored to have been part of the founding board of our North Valley Housing Trust. And we're constantly looking for innovative ways to find funding for housing and looking at funding housing sources that maybe commercial banking or traditional banking doesn't want to dip into. So a lot of activity going on that we want to bring the spirit of that into this committee. And then we just challenge the assumptions and say, well, what's really valid out here for our committee? So as the chair of what we at the Disability Action Center call our flagship systems change activity, that is the Diversability Advocacy Network. It is a 9-county network that has a statewide and national presence for all things legislative, administrative, functional, practical, for the things that we care about and identify, housing of which is one. This is a huge initiative that we're wanting to launch here. And we have a very big vision that we are trusting you each will begin to wrap your spirit around. But from this Dan perspective, I'll just kind of be in that background, guiding conversations, guiding your connection to our multi-county team of leadership that forms what we call the local master plan for aging advisory committee. Housing is one of the elements that we identified last year with Sharon's help. We did a lot of internal assessment from leadership. We did a lot of polling and sessions with our direct community. Housing, healthcare, housing obviously feeding into the challenges with maintaining healthcare. And you all again know those statistics. So Dan is just that facilitator to help us talk to more people, to ask questions. The end result is our projects, the elements that we talk about here in these meetings and at other tables will make things better, ultimately make things better. So we've received funding from multiple sources. One of the areas that we received funding came from the SCAN Foundation. They've been a huge supporter of our efforts in this area for probably 12 to 15 years now, actively working with us still. We have funding from the California Department of Aging as well, which is what's allowing us to be here today. And as a partner in what the state of California calls an Aging and Disability Resource Connection, we have a joint relationship with our Area Agency on Aging #3, which is Joe Cobury with Passages in downtown Chico. So think of the Disability Action Center and Passages as kissing cousins, so to speak. In other words, we have quarterly meetings together with our two teams that service the community directly, and we move as one in many instances. So if I take, for example, our average individual who is now on the streets homeless or living in their car without shelter, that individual, if they are at least 60 years of age, when they walk into the Disability Action Center looking for housing support, looking for resources, we will simultaneously connect them to Passages, because from age 60 upwards, they now qualify for additional services in the community. And those services can help them rehouse more quickly, can help them connect them to services that might stabilize their income. Between the two agencies, we now can move more quickly, more efficiently, which is why we formed the ADRC in our region. And we intend to expand that beyond Butte and Blaine County up into our northern and surrounding counties that we service. So we just had to have a starting place. So where you sit right now is looking at that bottom row where we have long-term regional master plan for aging goals. So we've formed these partnerships. We've looked for leadership to say, hello, Mr. City Council person, here's what we're doing. Would you figure out a way to help us financially fund this as you're looking at next year's budget? Hello, supervisor person. This is what we're doing. Would you join our master plan for aging advisory committee so that we have a pulse on what's happening in our county, that we can bring back to this decision-making table and have less delays on getting done what we all know requires to happen quickly when it comes to extremely affordable housing. And I use the word extremely affordable because affordable housing is not enough, not for many, many, many people. What's defined as affordable housing on a state or federal level technically is a joke. Technically is a joke. And we'd like to see that change, which is why we're so excited to support Home and Heart in their efforts, knowing that shared housing is the greatest untapped source of housing that most regions hold. And you know, I leave that conversation to Catherine. She knows her work way more efficiently than I do. So in our efforts to work with the governor's master plan for aging, housing is a critical element. And we all wanted you to join here so that we had not only your collaborative spirit, but also the expertise that you're bringing into this conversation. Our goal with the Housing Committee is to identify a long-term regional master plan for aging project or multiple projects. We're starting not looking at this from a Butte County or a Shasta County or a Tehama County or a Plumas County. We're looking at the region and saying, okay, I live and work in Tehama County. What connections do I have that I can bring their conversation in to identify a goal that we could actually make happen in Tehama County? Or I live in Butte County. Who are the players that I require to reach out to so that we can identify a possible project for this local master plan for aging advisory committee to now grab behind and support and find funding for and make more rapid change for our community that so desperately requires that energy put into guiding them. So it's taking the local leadership, doing more listening sessions where required. As Sharon brought out, we're now homing in and gathering more information. And Catherine, I believe that I gave you a copy electronically of our previous summary report, that 60, 70 page report that brought together some of the information that Sharon was talking about. If I've not done that, I can pump it out your way. I don't know if it'll connect in here. It might be too big, but I can send you that electronically. If anyone would prefer a hard print copy, they can holler at me. But that, again, takes the summation of a lot of the information that Sharon shared with you and her brief recap of almost 2 years of activity so far that we're now joining your energies with. And the goal, expansion, and more of what we know we require in our region. Housing is at the top of this list. Finding innovations to housing, finding funding to housing, finding projects that we could show as a success more quickly so that the community now gathers energy and momentum to make specific changes that are identified by us. Any thoughts or questions? I think that's like the down and dirty recap. You know, my main role in all of this is more awareness. So I travel the entire state, tip to tip, bringing awareness to what is happening in our northern region. Because what I've found on the state level is that most of the state considers Sacramento Northern California. And my response to this is, I'm here to identify and introduce you to what we call the true North. Okay? Because they stop at Sacramento and nary do we get a penny, nary do we get a thought. We're changing that in a very big way. Any thoughts or questions, Catherine? If there's anything that you want me to home in on specifically, I'm happy to do that. I just started out the gate with a very broad overview of what we're doing with the master plan for aging and where that funding is coming from right now. Currently, we're working off of funding coming from the California Department of Aging from a grant called LADAP, and that stands for Local Aging and Disability Action Planning. And our intention is to use this as a driver for continued funding coming into our region so that we can now accomplish more together. But again, it's your expertise, whatever contribution you can bring. Maybe you don't feel like you're the expert on something, but just the fact that you're here and willing to join the conversation puts us all land miles ahead of those who aren't able to come in at this time and join forces with their energy. And that small report there, that's the report I was talking about, Catherine. So if I have not sent that to you, give me a holler.
Yeah, so that if you haven't gotten that report, you should have gotten that report in the email invite. And if you haven't gotten it, just let me know and I will make sure that you get it. But yeah.
Perfect. Good. And of course, I'm happy to field any questions or any conversations that can help any of you feel more comfortable in your knowledge about this initiative and your knowledge about Centers for Independent Living or any aspect of what we're doing with this project. We don't see this as something that is going to end or we do it for a short period of time and then everyone moves on. We are looking at this as a shift in philosophy throughout our region. And that shift in philosophy is more multi-sector projects together, not looking at ourselves as county to county, but looking at ourselves as a regional community and bringing about the aspects of change for the community, setting a very different model. And I can tell each of you that we are very much being watched on a state and national level. The way that we've been able to work together is phenomenal, and we just want to see more of it.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I also just put the Aging and Disability Resource Center is going to have a kickoff June 13th. And I put a link in the chat for that. Sharon
Thank
dropped some really good links too for more information on her presentation before she had to leave. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Always just really, you always excite me when you talk about when you vision. And so I hope that's shared in this space. You all were sort of invited by either people that I knew that also have that spirit, or I knew you directly. So I'm going to open it up for questions real quick. Any questions for Carolyn or myself? Okay.
I'm glad to see names that I know on here. Hi, for those that's skirting around me, some new faces as well. So deeply appreciate your presence here. Look forward to getting to know you.
All right. Well, in that case, I think in our last 6 minutes here, I also, each person has their own networks. Each person has a whole team of people. And this process made me realize that too many of my networks are actually in Butte County. And so I appreciate the folks outside of the county. And if there's, in listening to today and kind of hearing the Sharon and Carolyn speak, if there's anyone that you feel like should be here that's not here, please, you CC me on an email with them, share this information with them. Like I said, we are recording this so I can send it out. Feel free to kind of think about your own networks and the work that you do and your partners, and think about if there's anyone that should be here that isn't. I would love to send them an invite. I think the bigger this group is, the better. And then I think the only thing left to kind of chat about is our next meeting. We were originally going to have this meeting on a Tuesday and ran into some tech issues. So we kind of went to this Thursday at 2 p.m. spot. Is this, we would be meeting monthly, so that would look like the last Thursday of each month. And I will start with an hour. There might be times where we have to kind of extend that further, but we can kind of start there knowing that everyone is probably busy. So how does that time sound and look for people? Maybe having it at this time, the third or the last Thursday of every month. Anyone who wouldn't be able to do that? Okay, we'll keep it going then.
Well, that was easy.
I know. I'm kind of shocked. All right, great. Well, in that case, I'm going to send out a couple of things. Sharon was talking about how we sort of took recommendations and put them into things that might seem more that we could actually implement, or that might be a little bit too tall of a push. And so we want to really focus on advocacy or policy. And so I will send that out so you all have that. And then I will also just include some of the things that were in the chat and send it out. Like I said, if there's anyone that you feel should be here that's not here, please connect me with them or just invite them, and we'll make sure they get in the mix. And then I'll send out a meeting calendar invite for our next meeting, which would be May 30th. Time is going by very quickly.
Yes, it does.
All right, before I let folks go, any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Like I said, thank you, Carolyn, for always coming in and getting people just really energized around our work. I think a lot of times in our work, it just kind of feels like there's not a lot that we can do. But I think getting the right group of people together, and then also like we talked about having the support of this local master plan on aging and this whole advisory committee behind us and potential funding through that. I think there's a lot of really exciting potential here. So thank you all for answering the call to come to this meeting. Let me know if you have any questions. I think you all have my email, and I will see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
Hey there. Do you want to stop your recording?
yeah, let's do that.